Today in Random in Psychology, we are going to be talking about the concept of groupthink. When we're talking about decision making in groups, especially relating to the unit on social psychology, we see that groupthink is one of the concepts that we hear about a lot. You've probably heard of it before. And it's basically this idea of what happens when a group has an excessive concern for reaching a consensus rather than making a good decision. And because of this, they don't really critically evaluate others. They may not speak up. Group members may not speak up and say, like, I disagree with what's going on. So when groupthink is occurring, group members are interested in maintaining harmony, suppressing differences, especially in highly cohesive groups. And this original research, or originally the concept was discussed in 1972 and again in 1983 by Irving Janis. So, a group experiencing groupthink is going to experience an illusion of invulnerability. They feel like nothing can harm them. They feel like nobody can come in and tell them that they are doing wrong. They experience rationalization for the decision that they're making. So, group members collectively rationalize away any sort of damaging information. They have an unquestioned belief in the group's inherent morality. They believe that the group is right and just, and they ignore moral implications and potential consequences. They have a stereotyped view of the other group, whether it's an enemy. So, if we're deciding whether or not to declare war, obviously there would be an enemy, right? And they have this stereotyped view that the enemy or the other group that is against them, they're too weak, maybe too stupid to resist this group's planned course of action. The group members may experience conformity pressures. So if I'm an individual in the group, I may feel like everyone else agrees. And so it's really hard for me to not agree. So I feel this pressure to conform with the rest of the group. And so we do something called self censorship. So we may not speak up and say, like, but I disagree, even though everyone else seems to be in agreement with what we're talking about. And because of the fact that people self censor, there becomes this what we call illusion of unanimity. So the group is unanimous, or so we think, because nobody's talking, but nobody's talking because they feel this conformity pressure. So it can be really hard in a large group or in a cohesive group for me to step up and be like, I think there's a problem with this decision making process because there's nobody else that seems to believe that there's a problem. And maybe if we're in a time crunch, especially, it can be really hard for one person to step up and say, like, I think we're making a wrong decision. And sometimes there's even people who kind of step up, and we can call them mind guards. So these are people who, if someone does say, well, what about this problem? Then a person will state, like, we can't think about that right now. We need to focus on this issue. We really need to make a quick decision on this. You're always worried about small details. So they're kind of guarding the decision that has already been made. And so people would refer to them as what we call mind guards. So that was, you know, Janice's original conception of groupthink. And within the past, oh goodness, do I want to do that that math? Uh, so 40 years. Um, there's been more research. So group cohesiveness has been found it's not really as crucial as directive leadership and consensus seeking are. So a group doesn't have to be as cohesive or buddy buddy, as long as there is a directive leader who is, telling people, this is what I think we should do. How many people support me? And, everyone just kind of goes like, groups concerned about enhancing morale and reaching agreement that are more than making a quality decision are going to be influenced by groupthink. Thinking in terms of potential failure may influence more risky decision making. So if we think, what happens if we make a bad decision? What happens if we fail? Then it can actually cause groups to make poor decisions. Again, time pressure or the perception of time pressure is going to be important. And group insulation. So if there's no input from outside members of the group, then people will feel this kind of rationalization of like, well, everyone else in our situation would agree as well. So if we have the leader who's promoting their preferred solution, that's going to increase it. And then groups with similar backgrounds, so homogeneity within the groups, are likely to think alike and obviously not likely to be as um, or to bring in diverse opinions. So the question becomes, okay, how do we avoid this? Pretty much we take all of those things and we turn them around. So if we perceive that there's a time crunch, we really have to figure out, is there? If there's not, then we need to, instead of making a decision right this second, we need to let people go home and, sleep on it and come back and discuss potential problems with the decision that we made yesterday. So actually bringing up potential problems with the decision as opposed to simply agreeing with it. We want to make sure that the leader is focused on making a good decision with the group as opposed to pushing their own decision, their own agenda, things like that. So group brainstorming as to potential ways to deal with the challenge, and then also individual brainstorming and pulling all of that individual brainstorming together can be useful. Voting in a way that makes it so that people don't know who voted for and against can be beneficial as well to decrease the possibility of groupthink. So that way, if we're anonymous in our voting and we don't feel that conformity pressure, and we can also recognize like, okay, there are other people who disagree with it. And so I don't feel as bad. And so I almost feel emboldened to come forward and say, hey, I disagree with what's going on right now. So that has been our discussion of groupthink for Random in Psychology today. And I will see you tomorrow.